KNOX FM. Jeff McMahon is my name, in for Ryan Cunningham. It's the Ryan Cunningham Show on KNOX. Hour 2, Segment A, we're going to talk about Defeat the Sadness. We're going to talk about bullying, and I realize it doesn't make a whole lot of sense now to talk about bullying in schools because we're not in school, but it's the summer. The kids that are being bullied aren't under that constant pressure, that constant push. Everybody's a little more relaxed. Everybody's a little more calm. Maybe you're on vacation. Might be time to start that conversation. You know, how are you doing in school? How are you interacting with the other kids, and how are the other kids interacting with you? And it's an important talk to have. From the Center for Disease Control in 2014, 64% of children who were bullied never said a thing. 64% of kids bullied never said anything. 36% are reported the bullying to authorities. More than half of the bullying situations, 57%, stop when a peer intervenes on behalf of the student being bullied. Let's say that again. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control, 57% of the time, if an adult steps forward and says enough, the bullying stops within 10 seconds. Statistically, that's what happens. Students who experience bullying are at increased risk for depression, anxiety, sleep difficulties, poor school adjustment. Students who bully others are at increased risk for substance use, academic problems, and violence later in adolescence and adulthood. Compared to students who only bully or who are only victims, students who do both suffer the most serious consequences and are at greater risk for both mental and behavior problems. Why is that important? Because according to a 2009 survey by Teen Online and Wireless Safety, 58% of bullies say they're bullying to get back because they were bullied. So a lot of the kids are both bullies and victims, and students who experience bullying are twice as likely as non-bullied peers to experience negative health effects such as headaches and stomach aches. It's a health problem. It's an emotional health problem. It's affecting, by some statistics, 90% of school-aged children right here in Grand Forks County. And I have one with me. Jamison Mozey, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
There we go. Hey, you've got a great voice.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want my job?
Yeah, I love your job.
There we go. All right, well, so I'm going to go home and spray. Jameson is just going to take us through the rest of the hour. Jameson is a local high school student and has started something called Defeat the Sadness, and that project grew out of your being bullied in high school.
Yes.
Now, you just heard the statistics that 64% of kids who are bullied never say anything to anybody. They internalize it. They find that deep, dark corner of their soul. They put it there, never to be seen again. Is that what happened to you? Do you at least identify, at least a little bit, with those kids that are being bullied at school, and they get off the school bus and don't say anything to anybody?
I do absolutely agree with those kids that choose that decision. For me, it was that way for a very long time, because I felt that nobody would care and nobody would understand, because I thought I was the only one going through this. But then, as it started to get a little worse and I started to find out who my true friends were and who were really close to me, I started to slowly open up, and thankfully I did open up about it, and now I'm very happy and I consider myself to be on the right path.
All right, so a little backstory. You had cerebral palsy.
I did.
And so obviously you were different from the other kids. That was really what could start that bullying snowball rolling, right?
Yeah, because it affected my leg muscles when I was very young, and over the course of my life I've had many surgeries. And because of those surgeries, I do walk a little differently, but it's all for the treatment. But because of how I walk differently, people would call me names, tease me, try to trip me, and just say I couldn't do things because of my walking. And it really did put me into a bad place where I didn't think anybody would understand me.
And so you shut yourself off.
Yep.
From your support groups, from your family, I don't know, from your church, from your community. You shut everybody off. From that same study from the Center of Disease Control, as reported by students who have been bullied, the self-actions that have some of the most negative impacts are most often used by youth and recommended to youth. The actions that have the most negative impacts is to tell the bully to either stop or tell the bully how you feel, to walk away from the bully, and pretend that the bullying doesn't bother you. Are those practices you tried at least early on while you were being bullied? Are those things that maybe your support group told you? Well, you know, mom, dad, no offense, mom's sitting right there. And I should, in the efforts of full disclosure, your parents, well, you and I live a mile and a half from each other.
Yeah.
Growing up, you had the coolest treehouse I have ever seen in my life.
Thank you. I still have that treehouse, by the way.
And so, but Mom and Dad said, just ignore it or walk away from the bullying. In your experience, especially early on, did any of those tactics work?
Well, I did try all of those tactics, and for a little bit it would work. Like, they would leave me alone for about a week, but then I saw that they'd come back in greater numbers. It started out as one bullier, but then now they came back with 2 or 3 of them, and then those tactics just ended up not working at all.
Now, if statistics hold out, 90% of the kids in your school are being bullied. Why don't the bullied, the victims, ever talk about it to each other? Did you ever get together with another bully and say, hey, you know what, this guy is bullying me, and he or she, yeah, that bully is bullying. Did you ever talk about what was going through your mind with someone that was walking the same path?
No, because for me and for a lot of kids, when you do get bullied and when you do go into that bad place, you feel like you're the only one, and you start to suffocate yourself because you think that no one will understand what you're going through, and that's why you shut off from the world. So no, I did not tell anybody about it.
So, speaking now as a parent, I've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old at home. So when your mom and dad came to you, when I go to my kids and say, hey, what's wrong? Are you already in that place where you've already shut off? Is there anything we can do to try to pry that truth out of somebody who's being bullied?
Well, obviously parents know when their kid is feeling sad, and my parents probably did understand that something was going on, but again, since I was feeling very alone, I didn't want to say anything. But there were a few times that I did open up to them a little bit, saying I was getting picked on, but I never disclosed how bad it was.
So you're in this place, you're shelled off from everybody else, you're being bullied. Would you say once a month? Once a week? Were you saying you're being routinely bullied? Was it a compounding thing where maybe 1 month there'd be one person and 3 weeks later there'd be 10 of them? Or how did it work? Was it just one person constantly reinforcing the message to you, or was it more of a collaborative group?
At first it was just one guy, and for a while that was just every, once a month or something. But over time they started to come back, and then it became a group of around 3 or 4 that would hit me every week to possibly twice a week. So it was very active.
And then in terms of your bullying, as we're trying to set up this idea that you stopped cutting yourself off and you actually went the entirely different way and created Defeat the Sadness, was your bullying physical? I mean, we've got this idea in high schools of this guy in black pants and a black shirt and a dog collar wore on his neck, shaking you until your lunch money comes out. Or was it more of a physical, or more of a verbal thing, more of a talk behind your back, gossipy type thing?
It was more of a verbal than physical, but there were physical aspects. I mean, I was trying to be tripped, and there actually was a few times where people would, push me into lockers and actually kind of, tug on my clothing and stuff. That never happened quite as often as the verbal stuff, but the verbal stuff did hurt, in my opinion, almost as bad as physical did.
So you're in this place, by your own admission, a bad place, and you decide, no, enough is enough, and you start this idea of Defeat the Sadness. When we come back from the break, we'll talk about how you started, what Defeat the Sadness is all about, and did you realize you were doing as much good as you are? Because according to that same study from the Center for Disease Control, students who are experiencing bullies are more likely to find peer interactions helpful, so interactions from other students, than anything a teacher could say or anything a parent could say. We'll talk about Defeat the Sadness next on News Radio 1310 KNOX and 107.9 KNOX FM. Thanks. Jamison, finally back to you. Thank you for letting me, do what the boss tells me I have to do.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Now, we're talking about bullying in schools. We're talking about the effect bullying has on high school students, and then more importantly, the change that you made. And by your own admission, you were bullied for, would you say, a number of years?
Yes, I would.
And you decide enough is enough. That I'm not going to just close myself off. I'm not going to be one of those 64% of students who just don't say anything about the bullying they see in schools. And I'm going to take it the complete opposite way. And you started Defeat the Sadness. How did that idea start?
Well, that's a great question. And, because of the bullying, I'd come home all down and about, and I wouldn't want to do anything. And I came home just like any other day from bullying, where I was down and about. And I started going on social media like Instagram and Twitter, and I started to look up these hashtags like cuts, bleeding, suicide.
Okay, stop. We should probably get some vernacular in there. To cut means that you physically injure yourself.
Yes.
And it's reasonably common, especially in high school kids, as they're down, as they're depressed. They cut themselves. They use what, a scissor,
A knife.
A knife. Anyway, and they cut themselves usually around their arms or
Yep.
around their legs. So anyway, continue.
Yeah, so I looked up those, and I found these horrible and disturbing images that just made me feel even sadder than I already was. And that's when I said, enough is enough. Not only for myself, but for other kids who don't have a voice for themselves. And I said, I'm not going to be a part of this. I'm not going to be like those kids in those photos, and I'm going to do something about it. So then later that day, I created a new Instagram page called Defeat the Sadness.
Now, for those of us who don't know what Instagram is, I guess I have an Instagram page, but basically it's a picture-sharing site where you connect with a number of your friends, and then you can post pictures and other people can comment on it.
Yep.
So you started your Instagram page and started sharing pictures of what?
Inspirational quotes that just say how great life is and how things can get better.
And the response you got was?
Fairly good. The first response I ever got was, "This looks amazing," but then as the weeks went on, people were like, "This is too young to even do anything," you know, and all these are just quotes, but for some people, these quotes were what they needed to get themselves through the day, so it really was making an effect on people, even in just the first 2 months or so.
So really, in essence, it was the social media version of patting someone on the shoulder and saying it's going to be okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And so the inspirational quotes revolved around what?
Just staying alive, finding a reason to get out of bed, and if someone does bully you, to just, you know, get it off your back and just go on about your day and remember how great of a person you are.
And it didn't end there. Where did we go from Instagram?
From Instagram, we actually went into Twitter, and that was great because I know a lot of my friends have Twitter. But then from there, I decided that I wanted to have a real physical aspect outside of social media, and that's when I decided to start doing live shows and to talking kids one-on-one in front of groups about how to, you know, survive and to live on.
And that's a perfect place to break for the bottom of the hour news. We'll talk about the Defeat the Sadness live shows, including your speech at the State SAD Convention, Students Against Destructive Decisions, coming up after news with KNOX and Doug Barrett next on News Radio 1310 KNOX and 107.9 KNOX News FM. Radio 1310 KNOX, 107.9 KNOX FM. I'm Jeff McMahon, in for Ryan Cunningham on The Ryan Cunningham Show. Ryan enjoying a well-deserved vacation. I'm in for him the rest of the week. Bullying is the topic in hour number 2. Jamison Mozey is our guest this afternoon. He was, seemingly, from the outside, I'm sure, a typical high school kid. You got a good family, you got good grades, I'm thinking. You were a typical high school kid. The problem is that you were bullied. You were suffering with some pretty serious dementia. Dementia is a different thing. Not dementia, depression. That's what I've got on my mind. I've got dementia. You had depression.
Yes.
And suffering with a little bit of depression, and you decided, nope, enough is enough. And one day started an Instagram page, which is a picture-sharing social media website, with basically inspirational phrases to help other people who were in your in your shoes, in the same place you were, and that started to help you through your depression, and it moved to Twitter, which is another social media website, and it started to grow. Did it grow fast? Did you ever wonder for yourself, why am I doing this? Or was it almost an instant, hey, I can help somebody else here?
It started out very small, and it took its time growing, and it still is today. And yes, there were times where I would sit back and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I only have, 100 followers on the site. What's the point? Why am I doing this? But just every now and then I get a good inspirational message, and it would just really bring on my day, make me want to continue.
The National Center for Education Statistics asked students where they think they're bullied the most. 46% of them said we're most bullied in the hallways at school. And like we mentioned before, some more than 50% of kids who are bullied never mention it to anyone. Jamison, if we were to take a video camera through the hallways of whatever school that you're in the district of, would those of us listening to KNOX, what would we think of what we saw?
I think it'd be hard to understand really how big the situation is. Definitely there would be some stuff that you see and you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's bad. But to most people who see it, they think it's just common teasing, and that's why people don't always step up for others. But yes, it is an issue, and I think that people would understand if they were to see a little more in depth about how bad things can be.
So if I were to put a video camera through the hallways of whatever school, if I just watched one day, I probably wouldn't get it. But if I watched a month worth of those same interactions over and over and over again, maybe I start to understand the compounding effect that this is all having.
Yes.
All right, so we're back to Defeat the Sadness. You had started an Instagram page, you had started a Twitter account, you were starting to see some positives in your life, and also seeing some positives in strangers that had been following your social media feeds. What was the next step? And more importantly, wouldn't this just make you a target for additional bullying?
Well, that's a great statement because it did make me a target, and my counselors and people who I did tell about Defeat the Sadness were very, forceful, saying if you decide to take this a step further, you will be a target. And I already knew that was going to happen, but I decided to do it anyway.
So did your teachers, your counselors, did people around you say, don't do this, don't, all they're going to do is they're just going to get worse. They're going to find another gear, another reason to tease you for something that you're doing differently than everybody else?
No one ever said really to not do it, but people said to take it very slow and cautiously, which I thought was a good approach at first, but then I realized I should really hit this full force.
Okay, so your next step from social media was what?
Doing live shows and talking to people in schools and at events.
Okay, so your first live show was where?
At Larimore High School at a junior SAD convention in front of 22 people.
Okay, so 22 people at a junior SAD convention in Larimore High School, and let's face it, Larimore did not have a really good year this year. I wouldn't be surprised if many students in that school are depressed right now. And you walk in, and you said, what?
I basically just told them my story. I told them my name and where I was from, but that first live show I did was the first time I'd ever open up to anyone, or really a large group, about my depression and my bullying. I told a few friends up to this point, but right now, in that day, I was just going out in front of people, 22 at the time, and I was saying, this is what happened, this is how it happened, and this is why it happened.
All right, and I guess I've given talks where I left the building and I thought, that was 22 minutes that these people will never get back. I knew I didn't make an influence on anybody. Did you get a feeling afterwards that this may be something you want to pursue farther, or was it just okay, thanks for coming, here's a couple of claps, here's your dinner, go home?
Well, after it ended and I said, thanks for coming and stuff, there was literal silence in the room. And I took that as a bad thing, and I was like, this is it, this was the first and only time I'm done. But then as people started to talk about it and say, thank you, that was so great, it made me want to keep going, and then that's when I decided this will not just be a one-time thing. These live shows will be a huge part of Defeat the Sadness. And
you went from 22 shows to a much larger crowd. How did you make that step from 22 people at Larimore High School to the state SAD convention, that's Students Against Destructive Decisions, and that was in Bismarck, right?
Yes, it was.
I know the video is available on YouTube if anybody would like to watch the entire video. How did that process come about?
Well, I actually wasn't prepared for it at all. I thought that the next show I would do would be either at Larimore or in a school, but it was thanks to those 22 kids who got on their social media sites like Instagram and Twitter and told their parents and stuff that's how people got my attention. And it was actually because of those kids that told the guy who runs the state SAD convention, who emailed me and said, hey, would you like to come down? So it was just an unsolicited email. You get in your email box one morning and look, here's an invitation to speak. We'll talk about your experience at the state SAD convention. We'll talk more about Defeat the Sadness coming up next on News Radio 1310 KNOX and 107.9 KNOX FM. Jamison Mozey is our guest in hour number 2 of the Ryan Cunningham program, where we're talking about Defeat the Sadness. He was bullied in school. He decided, nope, I'm going to start telling everybody else to keep their chin up. And that's where Defeat the Sadness started. It was your Instagram page, then a Twitter account, and then you had your first live show at Larimore High School. You spoke in front of 22 people. It was the first time you ever done it. And then suddenly you opened your email inbox one day,
and here was the guy that was managing the state convention for SAD, Students Against Destructive Decisions, and he said, hey, you want to talk to us? And what went through your mind?
At first, I didn't think it was real at first. I thought it was some joke.
Somebody's playing a trick on me.
Yeah, because I didn't know the name of the guy who ran it. So I saw this name, and I think it was Lee or something, and I was like, this isn't real. But then I read it, and it was legit because it had, you know, this little authentication thing behind it and stuff. And then after that, I was like, OMG, this is so amazing. This is going to just elevate me to the next level, and it did.
So you said yes, of course.
Yes.
And so you had been at the state SAD convention the year prior. You weren't a stranger to SAD. So how many kids are in SAD at Larimore High School?
I'd say maybe 40.
Okay, so y'all got in the school bus and you drove down to Bismarck to the convention. You expected what? When you thought on your way down to Bismarck, I'm going to speak in front of this people, how many people did you think were going to show up?
Well, since I did around 22 in Larimore and I knew this was going to be a bigger event, I estimated around 50.
So you thought 50, maybe 60 people would show up. The room held 160. How many people showed up?
Over 200.
People were sitting in the aisles.
Yeah.
Nice work.
Yeah.
And you spoke for roughly how long?
About an hour.
And what did you tell them?
I told them my whole story more in depth, and since at that time Defeat the Sadness had already been created, I told them more about it and, you know, what they can do to also help in this world, like, you know, to be a good person and such, and it just really made an impact on people.
So that talk at the convention probably fed back into your Instagram page, to your Twitter feed. Do you want to share some numbers with me? How many people follow you on Instagram?
Well, I have a personal page at Jamison Mozey, and then I have the Defeat the Sadness page. And for my personal page, I think I gained around 90 followers that day. And then for Defeat the Sadness, it was around 120 that day.
So 120 people signed up to your Instagram page that day, and Twitter, I suppose, would be roughly the same.
Yeah, that day.
And suddenly, you're now a name on the motivational talk circuit. We'll talk about maybe some upcoming events for Defeat the Sadness. All right, so the people that initially bullied you, now you're not only a speaker, you know, in Larimore, you're also a speaker now statewide. What do they have to say?
Well, thank you for your question, and it just kind of went away, you know. Actually, a few of them apologized, which I really found respectful and just out of the blue. I never expected that. But after I said enough is enough and they found out about Defeat the Sadness, they were like, I can't hurt this guy anymore. He's over it. He's done.
All right, and that question, not that I want to belittle the caller at all, I appreciate the phone call, but that brings up a bigger question. If so many kids are bullied in schools nowadays, 90% of students are bullied, why can't the bullied, the victims, just stand up and clock the bully?
Because you should never resort to violence, ever. Because I see it as if I had punched the bullies who were bullying me, it only would have made things worse probably because they might have retaliated back at me. So I always try to tell people who I know who are going through the bullying situation to never attack someone, to never say, get off my back, and then start swinging, because that might just not turn out good in your favor.
All right, so obviously as the mediator, the person running Defeat the Sadness, people come to you and say, I'm being bullied. This is what's going on in my life. Maybe I'm suffering from depression to the point where I'm now starting to physically injure myself. When that happens, what advice do you give kids?
I always tell the kids that do come to me and do come forward, you know, first I say thank you, because this is such a huge thing for kids to do nowadays, to just open themselves up, especially to me, a complete stranger. And when they do that, I always tell them that this is a safe place. Defeat the Sadness is a safe place, and that they know that I know what they're going through. So we always relate a little bit, and what I tell them is that I tell them just to rise above it, and just to be the better person. And if you are getting bullied to the point where you do want to cut yourself or something, or harm yourself, I always tell them to think about the people who mean the most in their lives, like their parents and their friends. And I always tell them, I say, what would your parents think if you came home that day and your wrists were bleeding? And most of the time it shuts them up, because they actually start to think about it. They think about other people. And that's, I think, a great thing, because that's what made me want to stop, was that I saw the disappointment on my friends' and parents' face, and I was like, I'm not only hurting myself, I'm hurting others.
Do you turn those people who come to you for suggestions in a direction? Do you say, well, you should really sit down and talk with your high school guidance counselor, with your parents, with your priests, or any church affiliation? Do you try to turn them toward some authority figure in their lives?
Yes, I do, absolutely, because I am one kid. I am just a 17-year-old from North Dakota. And granted, I may run a support group, but I am not the guy that has all the answers. I'm here to help and not to be the solution. So I always do say, okay, thank you for talking to me. Now you should go to your parents, or go to your priest, or go to your best friends, and just tell them. Because the more people you tell, the better chance you have of overcoming it.
All right, and because of your talk at the State SAD Convention, suddenly Defeat the Sadness is a lot more popular. You've gotten responses from that speech. You're going on the road this fall?
Yes. This fall we actually have 2 shows planned in Bismarck. And I'm not going to say where because I'm going to surprise people with that a little later. But yes, there are 2 shows confirmed for Bismarck later this year.
All right, and let's give people the access information. If they're more interested in Defeat the Sadness, or maybe they want to slip a little note to their children, to their grandkids, what's the information?
You can find us at Instagram and Twitter, and if you ever want to get into contact with me, just comment on the page or say, hey, can I talk? And if you ever want to tell anybody about it, I highly recommend you to, because the more people you tell, the more it can grow, and the more it can grow, and the more lives it can affect.
All right, and you're going into your junior year in high school. On a positive note, have you thought anything about life after high school? Are you picked out a college, picked out a career course? What are you thinking?
Well, I'd like to stay close to home. I've been raised in North Dakota my whole life, even though I was born out of the state. So I'd like to go to somewhere close, maybe UND or NDSU. And for my career, one of the biggest things that helped me through my depression before Defeat the Sadness was music. So I think that no matter what I do, even if I decide to keep with Defeat the Sadness my whole life, I will incorporate music some way. And in my live shows, music will be more incorporated heavily and will really just make people feel a lot happier.
So you're thinking music instead of like a psychology or something like that?
For right now, yeah.
Fantastic. Jamison Mozey is his name, the founder of Defeat the Sadness. He turned the negatives of bullying into what looks like so far a pretty positive experience.
Yep.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate you stopping by. And I do have parting gifts for you.
Oh, thank you.
I've scheduled a tour of the brand new building.
That sounds great.
It's like Disneyland in there. It is the neatest place in the whole wide world. I'm Jeff McMahon in for Ryan Cunningham. Stand by for ABC News coming up at 3 o'clock. Followed at 3:02 with, I believe, Kevin Dean in the KNOX newsroom. And more coming up on the Ryan Cunningham Show on News Radio 1310 KNOX and 107.9 KNOX FM.